Yes, it's like deja vu all over again.
Welcome back.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back, and I gather my opponent has declined to
It does appear that way.
show up.
So let's get started. If
Okay,
you're ready.
I'm all yours to command.
Wonderful. Let's begin. This is the pop quiz. What seat are you running for?
Senate District 17.
Thank you. They run together and they're in different places now, and I grow
Yeah.
intensely confused as I try to recall what district we're interviewing for.
Understandable, and we are in Senate District 17 now.
Oh, well, what do you know?
And this was Senate District 17, it's still Senate District 17, so I am proud to have a land league among my constituents.
Where does the Stratford district?
My district, if you start at the Hawthorne Bridge, my new district, go up the river to the St. John's Bridge, go across the river, I pick up the southern part of St. John's. And then you go back across the river and you go all the way up to the tip of Sylvia Island. And then you cut across, so I have pretty much all of Forest Park. You go all the way across to 185th. And you go down 185th to Highway 26. And then you come back going east again. And somewhere around Cedar Hills Boulevard, there starts to be this odd cutout around St. B's and Cedar Mill that I haven't quite wrapped my head around yet. And then you come back down to Highway 26 and you go all the way back to the river. So fundamentally, anything north of 26 and east of 185th with a small cutout.
Did it change much in the
It
course of
changed a lot.
How so?
I picked up most of downtown Portland. I did not have,
Congratulations.
thank you. I did not have much in Southwest until you got to Washington County. So in Multnomah County, I didn't have any of Southwest, and I didn't even have all of Northwest in my old district. I also, and now I do, basically everything north of Highway 26, with the exception of that one area out by St. B's, is in my district now. And that means everything north of Market and downtown. I also did not have, I stopped at the railroad bridge. I started at the Broadway Bridge, so I didn't have Old Town. I started at the Broadway Bridge and only went to the railroad bridge. So I had Broadway, Fremont, and the railroad bridge. Now I have parts or all of 8 bridges. So I am the bridge queen, even though I don't play it.
Nicely said.
Thank you. And I certainly was nobody in the last version of districts, no Portland area legislator crossed the river, and I'm the only senator now crossing the river. So I picked up that part of St. John's. So geographically, I think my district is as big, if not bigger, than it used to be, but I picked up a lot of areas where no one lives. Because I picked up the other half of Forest Park, I picked up all of Washington Park, I picked up all of downtown, I picked up all the industrial area along the river, I picked up Terminal 4. So geographically, my district is at least as big as it was. It's just fewer people actually than I am currently representing.
So as you talk to people in this district, I'm assuming you're doing some door knocking or at least getting to know some of your new
Yeah,
constituents.
absolutely.
What are you hearing from people in places that you had not represented before?
I think just in general, they want to know who I am and what's important to me. They appreciate the work that I've done on public health. They appreciate the work that I've done on the budget for the past 4 years, well, really my entire time in the legislature, but particularly the last 4 years. They're very interested in a lot of the same things that most voters are interested in. They're interested in reproductive health. They're interested in education. They're interested in public safety. They're interested in the economy. And they're interested in the environment. And I don't think, though, my constituents are dramatically different from many Oregonians.
So tell us a little bit about you, what you've accomplished in Salem. Why don't you walk us through 2 or 3 achievements in the last 4 years?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, one of them was more than 4 years ago, but it's probably one of the most important bills I'll pass, which is to raise the legal age for tobacco and e-cigarettes to 21 in the state. Oregon was the 3rd state in the nation, and I was really proud to help lead the team that did that. I'm a family physician by profession, and upstream public health is one of the reasons I went into the legislature. So we know that most high school kids know somebody over 18 who might be willing to buy them cigarettes. We also know they're much less likely to know someone over 21 who'd be willing to do that. So delaying kids' access to tobacco and nicotine products in general really makes a difference in reducing smoking rates, and that'll make a huge difference in the long-term well-being of the state. So I'm pretty proud of that one, and I think it's a big deal. 2019, I passed a bill to create, and I say these things are always team efforts, and I want to be really clear about that. It's just that I helped lead the charge on it, and it's something I've worked on. Create the nation's first statewide universally offered home visiting program for families with new babies. So once it's fully rolled out, and it's been a little delayed by the pandemic, which is sort of the theme of our lives these days. Once that gets fully rolled out, every family with a new baby, whether it's your first or your fourth, will be offered 1 to 3 home visits by a trained public health nurse to come in and, at the family's invitation, it's all optional, to get an assessment of the family's well-being, of the baby's well-being, of any needs they might have, and help connect them with the right services for that family, and make sure that they're getting all the care that they need to help them thrive. And it's not about telling people how to parent their children, it's about helping them be the best parents they can, and whatever that means for their family. So I'm pretty excited about that one, because I think it can make a huge difference to help families in some tough times. Having a baby's hard, no matter how many you've had. So I'm excited about that one. Really, the last 4 years, the vast majority of my work has been focused on budget. I have had the privilege of being either a budget subcommittee chair or now full Senate co-chair of the budget committee for 10 years now, and full co-chair for 4. I do budget for 2 reasons. The first is because budget is policy, and we as a state should be making decisions with our money, your and my tax dollars, that reflect evidence-based policy that will help as many Oregonians as possible. And in particular, help people who've historically been disadvantaged by systemic racism, by multi-generational poverty, things like that. So what we do with our discretionary money, when we have some, is really important. I'm also really fiscally conservative, and I think it's very important that we maintain robust reserves, that we maintain robust ending fund balances, that we look hard at evidence, as I said, about whether programs are shown to be effective and whether they're continuing that efficacy after we've invested in them, because resources are not limitless. And it's very important that we get the maximum effect from every dollar we spend. So I think we've done a pretty darn good job of that over the past 4 years, especially with the craziness of the past few years with the pandemic, and a lot of extra resources coming to the state. So we've spent one-time dollars on a lot of one-time investments, dealing with a lot of infrastructure projects that have been long delayed. So I'm pleased about that. And done a lot with the additional dollars available through Medicaid to improve things for Oregonians who benefit from those programs, both on the health side and the human services side.
Great. Where are you on Measure 114? The gun.
In general, I am very supportive of pretty much any gun safety measure that comes my way. And this one has a lot of components that I think are really important. I respect people's Second Amendment rights. I think that the interpretation of the Second Amendment has been overly broad. Self-defense is not a well-regulated militia, right? And that's what the Constitution says, is a well-regulated militia. So, do I think that people ought to be able to own guns? Sure. But do I think that, high-speed weapons with big capacity magazines are necessary for self-defense or hunting? No, I don't. Do I think that there are a lot of people who own guns who have never fired a gun and don't understand what it means to fire a gun and how hard it is to do it well? Because I have. I've been a gun owner. I've been out in the woods on, makeshift ranges, and I've been at regular ranges. It's not easy if you've never fired a gun, or even if you have to practice a lot.
They really kick.
They really kick. And whether that's a handgun or a rifle, they kick a lot. So I think requiring people to have some live fire training is a pretty reasonable thing. Texas does that, just to be clear. We would not be the first state by any means, and it's not just blue states that are doing this. Texas requires live fire training. So I don't think high-capacity magazines are necessary for self-defense or for hunting. I don't think that you should own a gun without actually having fired a gun and gotten some training on how to fire a gun safely and how to handle a weapon safely. I think that closing the Charleston loophole is really important, because if your background check didn't come through, there's probably a reason, and we need to be sure that we're not selling guns to people who are dangerous. The vast majority of gun owners are responsible people who want to keep their guns secured and want to use them appropriately. We just need to be sure that everybody who owns a gun owns the right kinds of weapons and has the right kind of training.
Okay. So that's a yes.
That's a yes. It's a long yes, but you didn't ask that question. You said, where are you? So I answered the question you asked me.
I don't feel like I got it. I think it was a good use of our time.
Okay, good.
Forgive me, I'm going to forget the number. I think it's 113. That's the anti-walkouts that stay in your job. Bill, yes or no?
Yes.
And why?
Any other job in the universe, if you don't show up for work and you haven't been excused from work, you lose your job. Sorry, did you?
I gotta interrupt, because I've heard this so often. It's the Democratic talking points. If anybody else had a job and they were out for 10 days. Here's what I don't get. And Elizabeth, you're someone who has made an attempt to try to bridge the divide in the state. I don't see how this move does it. What this strikes me as a Democratic Party that is going to bludgeon Republicans because they don't like them showing up to work. And this isn't democracy.
No, I
The
disagree.
fact of the matter, no, wait. If I was in Harney County, if you were talking to the editorial board in Harney County, and I told you that you want to change the Constitution so that the state representative that I duly elect, that I decide to vote for knowing that they have unexcused absences, you're taking away my voice. Because the fact of the matter is the reason why they're not showing up is because they don't have a voice. So wait, how does that, I'm the Harney County editor, how is that bridging the divide in the state? How does that not feel to Republicans that you're bludgeoning them, not even statutorily, you're going in and you're changing the Constitution? Now that's aside from the fact that your party has used this in the past, in Oregon, your party uses it currently in the state of Texas. And it just strikes me that this is not progressive democracy. You talk a good game, but instead you're not willing to leave this up to the voters. You want to leave it to the judiciary or change the Constitution. So how is it possible that this is going to, I'm going to finish here, I'll stop filibustering. How is it possible that this is going to bridge the divide in the state?
I don't know that it will. What I do know is this. I, as you said, have made substantial efforts to bridge the divide. I have had very few bills in my entire tenure in the legislature that I have chief sponsored that I haven't had a Republican as a co-chief sponsor. Because my feeling is if my bill is too extreme to get a Republican to co-chief, if I can't get a Republican to co-chief sponsor it, it's probably too extreme. With one exception, which is Measure 111, but we'll leave that separate. So, what bothers me is Republicans who aren't willing to sit down and have a conversation, and who aren't willing to come to the table, and who assume that just because they're in the minority, those of us in the majority aren't willing to have a conversation with them and aren't willing to find a reasonable middle ground. Because many of us are. And
obviously they feel that you're not, which is why they walk out. No, they may be unreasonable.
You didn't want me to interrupt you.
Okay.
Thank you. So, I understand that some of them feel that they won't. I will remind you, however, that when Senator Knopp took over, we had quorum. As Senator Knopp took over, we had quorum all of the 2022 session, or just about all of 2022 session. And that's because we do have reasonable Republicans who understand. It's a small percentage of the Republicans who think that they aren't being listened to, and they are on the fringes. Both parties have fringes. I don't like fringes on either side, right? I really think there's a lot to be gained from coming to the middle. And I'll tell you something else. I don't assume that Democrats are going to be in the majority in the state forever, right? We are now.
Well,
I do not assume that that's going to be true. And if the people of Oregon think that the Democrats overstepped in this regard, they can vote us out of office.
you can also vote out of office the Republicans who are walking out. I mean, isn't it hypocritical for you on the one hand to say, well, voters can vote us out if they don't, but we don't want to give the voters in Harney County the authority to vote people out because we don't trust them, so we're going to change the Constitution. Elizabeth, answer me this. Why didn't you just go in and change the supermajority rules rather than to muck with the Constitution?
Can't change this. The supermajority is in the Constitution.
Change the Constitution.
We
You're
are changing the Constitution.
No, you're not changing the
No,
Constitution.
because
You're changing
people,
the quorum.
because
You're changing
people,
the
I
Constitution.
know. I'll tell you something. The people of Oregon overwhelmingly think that the walkout rule is reasonable, and they don't like changing the quorum rules. I don't understand why. I can't claim to understand why, but that's what the polling tells us. So I wasn't involved with crafting this ballot measure.
But you're supporting it.
Excuse me?
But you're supporting it.
Yes, I am, because you know what? In 2020, there were a lot of reasons we had as many emergency board meetings as we did, mostly because of the pandemic. But you know why? Because we had a failed legislative session in 2020 because they wouldn't come to the table, and we had budgets that had to be balanced that we couldn't balance. Even if we hadn't had a pandemic, it would have been really problematic.
I'm aware of the hardship that Republicans who walked out created for you folks. I'm aware of that. I just don't see how, if the larger goal here is to try to find some common ground, how this gets you anywhere closer. It strikes me that all it does is a demonstration of the brute force the Democratic Party enjoys in this state.
I think we're going to have to agree to disagree about this one. I don't know how to answer you any better than I have. I do not believe that Democrats will necessarily always be in the majority, so this will apply to us when we're in the minority also. And you know what? It should. If I were in the minority, I would want this to apply to me also, because I would be willing to come to the table, and I would sit down, and I would negotiate. And the only time in Oregon the Democrats have done this is in 2001 around redistricting.
Right.
And that was because there was unconstitutional gerrymandering being proposed. And that's a little bit different than walking out because you don't like a bill about climate change.
I just want to make sure I understand. The decision to not, if you're going to change the Constitution, the decision to not change the quorum rules, but to rather change the Constitution, which is basically taking away an individual's ability to decide who they want to have as representative. Why was the decision made to go that way?
I don't know the answer for sure, but I believe that the people of Oregon want to keep the 2/3 quorum for quorum, the supermajority for quorum. And they agree that people who don't show up for work, the majority of Oregonians
I
already agree.
I'm aware
So,
that ballot
I
type
don't-
was poll tested, yes.
I don't know, I was not involved with crafting either this ballot measure. I was not involved in getting it on the
And
ballot.
it concerns you not the least that the state
There is
Constitution is
no-
being changed to punish Republicans. Doesn't concern
It is, I think that's a false premise. I do not think it is being changed to punish Republicans. I think it is being changed to punish people who aren't willing to come to the table in good faith. You don't always get what you want, and that's true for Democrats when we were in the minority, and maybe in the minority again in the future, and it's true for Republicans now. And walking out, taking your ball and going home is not a way to get stuff done for the people
And
of
one more
Oregon.
thing, I gather you're comfortable that the determination as to what is in good faith will be up to whichever party is in control. So that,
Technically, that is true. I will tell you that under Peter Courtney, the reasons for excused absences have been very, very broad. And I doubt that will change under the next Senate president, although of course we don't know who the next Senate president will be.
okay,
I cannot guarantee you how the future is going to play out here. And it may be that 4, 6, 10 years from now, the people of Oregon will change their minds, and they will change that piece of it and change to a simple majority for quorum. I don't know. I really don't.
okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes or no on Portland's charter reform?
Oh, God. I don't know yet. I haven't decided.
You're waiting for our endorsement.
Excuse me?
You're waiting for our endorsement.
No, I'm waiting
Oh.
to actually, I will be interested in your endorsement.
Okay,
But
fair
I'm
enough.
getting information from a lot of other sources too. Because in general, do I think the Portland system of government needs changing? Yes, 100%. Do I completely agree with everything that's in this particular proposal? I'm not sure. I'm not sure I agree with multi-member districts. I worry a little bit about that. I worry about how the ranked choice voting is gonna play out. And those are the two things that worry me the most. I believe that ranked choice voting has a real role to play. And I think it's a way to reduce extremism, and I think that's really important in our elections, broadly construed.
Agreed, actually.
Okay,
But I think people get hung up, and I think you're gonna say this, and I'm interrupting you and telling you what you're gonna say, but, don't people kind of get hung up on this question of multi-member districts plus ranked choice voting
Yeah.
as a
Yeah.
meringue?
Yeah, I think that's the real problem. And I believe Commissioner Maps and others are planning on putting forward another proposal. If they put it forward, I haven't seen it yet. If they haven't, I hope to God they put it out.
They have.
Okay, then I will go back and read it. It's been the Jewish high holidays and I've been traveling and, anyway,
Haven't here.
thank you. So I'm gonna look at that and see if I think it presents a viable alternative and see what the plan is to get it on the ballot soon. Because we need to change our system of government here. It doesn't work. Portland used to be the city that works and now it doesn't. And I think many of our city commissioners are trying to act in good faith, and I think they're hamstrung by the way it is. I think that electing people citywide is a bad idea. And I firmly believe we need to change. I just don't know if the proposal that's on the ballot right now will ultimately get us where we need to go in the most effective way. More commissioners, yes. More district by district, yes. Multi-member districts, I think, are problematic in states that have that for state legislatures. So I worry about it.
Elizabeth, can we ask you to give us an example of your independence from the party?
Sure. Let me think about recent ones. Well, we had emergency board a couple weeks ago, and there was a item to give money for a capital construction project in Eastern Oregon that literally everybody on the emergency board voted for except me, because I don't think we should be doing capital construction during emergency board. That's bad precedent, and we shouldn't be doing it. And I also think that project has challenges.
What was the
So
project?
it's what's called a reload center where
Reload?
reload. So
Oh, is this Greg Smith's Onion Depot?
That would be it.
So were you the only vote on the board
to
against?
the best of my knowledge,
How
yes.
about the vote to give $11 million to hospitals? Did you vote in favor of that?
I did vote in favor of that.
Is there an
because-
argument to be made that hospitals don't need a bailout from the state?
No, not right now. There have been in the past, and I've been very opposed to giving hospitals money or listening to them cry poor in the past, and now, not so much.
So how do you think about this? So Providence is a good example, right? They lost a bunch of money last year, but it's a nonprofit. They don't pay a lot of taxes. They have over $1 billion in investable assets. Now, I realize that you're not supposed to touch your reserves, but it's a very wealthy organization.
I don't know enough to comment on any specific health system. I would say that every organization has its charter, has its bylaws, and they have rules about when they can and cannot invade their reserves. I do think that the expenses that our health systems are facing right now in terms of staffing, in terms of supplies, in terms of all the same inflationary costs that the rest of us are facing, and then some, are extraordinary. And this is not a permanent fix. I'm not going to be interested in continuing to subsidize hospitals.
No, I
But
understand.
in the short term, we have Oregonians who are dying because of lack of access to care, and I know documented cases. So I am not interested in having Oregonians die because they don't have access to surgical care.
But let's get back to your question, which you're saying you don't have enough information to determine whether or not Providence really should be coming to you, given that they've got $1 billion in reserves, right? And it's a complicated company.
It's a complicated conversation,
And my
right?
guess is they have better accountants than the state of Oregon does. That may or may not be the case. But what's your responsibility on the e-board before a huge company like this comes to you and says, I want $11 million? What sort of due diligence do you need to do, not to determine the need? We're aware of the nursing shortages. We're well aware that they've got people in beds that they can't get rid of. But whether or not this is money that they actually need, what's your obligation to Oregonians? If Willamette comes to you and say, we need $1 million to keep our paper open, what's your obligation to sort through whether or not we really need it? It's a little bit different. The public need is there on the healthcare side, but it's interesting that literally a week after you gave hospitals $11 million, they file a federal civil rights lawsuit against the Oregon Hospital Authority, which I want to ask you about, but the timing of that, Oregon Health Authority.
Yeah, I'm a little annoyed.
Well, I'm sure the timing of that was intentional. They weren't going to ask for money after they filed the suit.
I'm sure they were.
But how do Oregonians feel about it? I mean, they're well aware of the behemoth that is Providence. You read the story in the New York Times
I did read the story.
about their
Can I,
highly unethical
Mark,
practices.
Mark,
Yes.
can you let her answer the question for
Go
a
ahead.
second so that we
Go ahead.
actually learn something?
Yep.
If there is one thing that is true, is that healthcare and health policy are really, really complicated. And how health systems are structured and their finances sometimes take an incredibly long time to untangle and for us to understand. That being said, I trust, generally speaking, I trust the Oregon Health Authority that they were in very close conversations with the hospitals, because they were. I would not have done this if the Oregon Health Authority didn't agree with us doing it, right, giving the money to the hospitals. I would not have done this without talking with colleagues of mine, physicians around the state who are seeing what this is like on the front lines and who are seeing patients either become much more sick or die because of it. And I made it clear that I was not going to be interested in doing this on an ongoing basis. We are in very unusual times. People overuse the word unique, so I won't. We are in very unusual times, and we sometimes have to do unusual things. I do think, we did not specify how those $11 million should be distributed, and the Hospital Association is going to have that conversation internally, right? And some of that money is also going to our long-term care facilities so that we can get people out of the hospital into the right level of care. Because people sitting in hospital beds when they don't need hospital level of care is not a good use of anybody's time or money. So you need to get the long-term care facilities, the skilled nursing facilities staffed up also.
What I'm hearing you say is you placed your trust in the OHA.
I place my trust in a lot of different people, but yes, OHA was part of it.
So how do you respond to the fact that every gubernatorial candidate is saying that the OHA is going to be the agency they take a hard look at, and they basically all said Pat Allen loses his job. So there are three people who quit. There are three people who don't have the same confidence in this agency that you have.
So I would say this. I don't know when the last time they said that was, because I haven't watched every single debate. If they've said it recently, I have. Christina Kotek has said it recently. I haven't heard it. Has she?
Mm-hmm.
When did she say it most recently?
The gubernatorial debate.
The most recent one?
Yeah, she didn't use Pat Allen's name, but it's
I think every gubernatorial candidate should take a hard look at every single agency. I do think they should. And OHA is our most expensive agency with the exception of corrections, right?
Yeah.
And, well, we're about on par with corrections. And so, should we take a look at the agency that spends the most of our general fund dollars? Yeah, we should, with the exception of education, but that's not really the state spending it, it's the agency, it's the school boards.
Right.
So, should whoever the next governor is take a hard look at OHA? Yes. Am I convinced that Pat will actually lose his job under all three of them? No, I'm not. I think he's done a very, very good job under very trying circumstances. We have not had a director of that agency last that long I can't tell you how long. And I think if he had been doing a terrible job, Governor Brown would have done something about it too. Because she did not tolerate agencies not functioning well. Yeah.
Can I ask you the same question about, Title I, the insurance commissioner?
Safe.
No, you're talking about SAFE or you're talking about DCBS?
DCBS.
To the best of my knowledge, there are no significant concerns about Director Stolfi, but you may have heard something I haven't.
No, I talk to people who practice, who operate in both states, and what they say is that the insurance commissioner in Washington is aggressive, is going after insurance companies regular, and that the perception is, even for a Democratic state, that the insurance commissioner here is a toady, is completely in the pockets of the insurance company. And this is not me, this is the opinion of people who operate in healthcare law in both states.
I need to see more to be able to even
Is
address
that in
that.
your purview? I mean,
Well, everything's in my purview, I'm the
Well,
budget chair. I have oversight at some level
Yeah.
over any agency that has general fund
Mhm.
in particular, although we're certainly aware of every single agency, even the ones that are all other funds. So, yeah, technically it is, but it's not one that I'm hearing a ton of complaints about. And I will say, we have some pretty active consumer-focused organizations in this state, and they are pretty good at pounding on my door if they think that the state isn't doing enough to protect consumers. And since I haven't been hearing from OSPRD or the Oregon Center for Public Policy, or the Oregon Law Center, or any of the other consumer-oriented, consumer protection-oriented entities about failures on the behalf of the Division of Financial Regulation of the Department of Consumer and Business Services, I'm not as concerned, but that doesn't mean there might not be a problem I'm not aware of.
Can I just get you to comment on the civil rights lawsuit that I mentioned earlier, that you said you were annoyed? I'm just wondering what your thinking is about the merits of that.
I haven't seen the details. I knew it was coming because the Hospital Association told me a couple of hours before they filed it, which I appreciated, since I was one of the chief sponsors of the Mergers and Acquisitions bill. I think their arguments are problematic. I do not think this is a violation of free speech. I think this is essentially no different from certificate of need, despite their argument to the contrary. And I think we have seen time and again that monopolistic behavior leads to increased prices. Monopolies increase prices. And we saw that in lots of parts of the state. I mean, right now, one health system owns every single hospital in Central Oregon. Every single hospital. And that's been a problem because the insurance companies have had to pay much higher rates to the hospitals there because they have to have network adequacy, which means they need hospitals.
You know, there's been a lot of writing about how one of the reasons that healthcare costs are being driven up is by the entrance of the private equity market, buying up practices. Are you familiar with this? I'm just wondering if you
I'm
have any
aware of
thoughts.
it, I'm aware of it. I think we were seeing a lot of disproportionate increase in the healthcare
Mhm.
market long before private equity started buying up healthcare entities.
Mhm.
Pharmaceutical prices are high, labor costs are high, various supplies are high. Right now we've got inflation all over the place, but that was true even before. Pharmaceutical prices and hospital prices are the two biggest contributors. It's not outpatient practices that do it, generally speaking.
Anesthesiology, not a driver.
In and of itself, no, not by itself. It's too small a segment to be a driver in and of itself. Is it part of hospital costs? Is it part of operative costs? Sure, it is. And, the whole conversation about how we pay for healthcare and what we pay for is an entirely separate conversation.
All right, I'm holding up this meeting, and I'm sorry.
No,
Is there one other way you can demonstrate your independence from the Democratic Party? You mentioned this capital construction e-board decision. Anything else?
Well, frankly, I think the fact that I've insisted on finding Republicans to co-chief sponsor my bills, and I've been willing to compromise on things that some of my colleagues haven't wanted to compromise on, has been a pretty good sign of that.
Okay.
I don't know a lot of Democrats who make a point of doing that. I'm not trying to be difficult to my colleagues, I'm just saying, sometimes I kind of annoy my colleagues by the fact that that's important to me.
All right.
I'm going to stick to the Oregon State Hospitals for one more second, because I think there's at least spiritual connection on some level between the place that you represent now, downtown Portland, and the backlog at the Oregon State Hospital.
That's
But
true.
How do we fix it? And I know that's a too broad a question, but isn't there something fundamentally broken, and how do
There
we
is.
get to beginning to fix that thing?
There isn't one thing that's fundamentally broken, there are several things that are fundamentally broken. The most important thing is decades-long underinvestment in mental health care. And not just in Oregon, although Oregon has definitely had a bad run of this. And it's something that a lot of us have been trying to fix for a while. It's become such a crisis that finally everybody else is paying attention to. So decades of underfunding, which means that people haven't had the treatment that they needed early, which means that they don't stay off the streets, they do end up in the criminal justice system. We have pretty broad definition of what able to aid in your own defense means. And if you aren't able to aid in it, then the counties can remand you to the state hospital until you are able. The problem is, there are two problems there. The first is that when people like that are remanded to the state hospital, they are not actually treated. They may be stabilized with medication, and they may be coached on how to aid with in their own defense. But they are not actually given long-term treatment. And on top of that, when they come out, this is part B of the first problem, when they come out of the state hospital, they rarely have a treatment plan in place, and often their medication regimen goes by the wayside, and they decompensate again, and they go right back on the streets, or they go right back into the state hospital, right? That happens for multiple reasons, but one of which is this ongoing underinvestment in infrastructure, which means we don't have enough secure residential treatment facilities, or SRTFs, in this state. We don't have enough other kinds of intensive outpatient treatment. We don't have the right kinds of people providing follow-up with people who are stable enough to be out of the state hospital, don't necessarily need to be in an SRTF, but do need ongoing evaluation and oversight. We don't have any of that. We're getting there. The investments that we're making are starting to make a difference, but it's going to take some time. The second problem is, frankly, the way the system is set up disincentivizes counties from treating people themselves and from giving them the help that they need in their home county, as opposed to shipping them to state hospital. When people go to the state hospital on an aid or an assist or 370 hold, their care, quote unquote care, is paid for by our tax dollars, our general fund dollars that go to the state. When people are in the county correction system, the counties pay for them. Now, I'm not going to universally ascribe bad motives to our counties, but I will say that it's hard to see where the financial incentive is for the counties to actively engage in providing the upfront care that keeps people out of the criminal justice system and out of the state hospital. Because it doesn't cost them a dime when someone's in Salem at the state hospital or in Junction City. It does cost them money when they're here. So we need to figure out a more equitable system where we work with the counties and we aren't in opposition with them to figure out how do we actually take care of the people we're all supposed to be taking care of, because that should be our focus. The state's made some, can I just say one thing about this? Actually several, but one of the things that we did, in 2019, we passed Senate Bill 973, which created the IMPACTS program, which is a pilot program that's been investing. We invested $10 million in the 1921 biennium and another 10 in the 21-23 biennium to give money to counties and tribes that are working on keeping people who are frequent flyers in and out of the criminal justice system because of severe persistent mental illness out through case management, through appropriate outpatient care, through permanent supportive housing, through all sorts of things. We're already starting to see a difference with those investments, and those kinds of programs are exactly what we should be doing, because it's in no one's best interest, most of all the person who's cycling in and out, and that's really what we should be focused on, because it is an aggregation of our obligation to provide for the human dignity of every single Oregonian, that we are providing the right kinds of care to help them be healthy, as healthy as they can be, and stay out of the criminal justice system and be in a safe environment, whatever that means to that individual.
Sure. also identified in this conversation a loophole that I find disconcerting on a public safety level, which is that if a person is not mentally well enough to aid in their own defense, how is it possible that they're healthy enough to be sent back to be free on the streets?
Oh no, here's the problem. Here's how it works. There are tests for whether someone's able to aid in their own defense. Once they pass those tests, it depends on how stable they are, right? There's degrees of stability, right? And whether they have whether we know they have housing to go to, or all sorts of, whether it's the right kind of treatment facility. But one of the reasons the state hospital is so jammed is because we don't have the right places for people to go next. And we don't have enough permanent supportive housing or secure residential treatment facilities. The problem is, we cannot necessarily mandate that someone in permanent supportive housing actually stay there. We have no capacity to do that. We can incarcerate people in county jails, but that's not a particularly therapeutic environment. If we had more SRTFs, we could remand people to SRTFs of the right kind and have some legal authority to do that. But that's a secure treatment facility as opposed to permanent supportive housing, which is not a secure facility where we cannot keep people. And many people with severe persistent mental illness, once they get stabilized, and we know this across the board, even people who never end up on the street, once they're stabilized, and they've been stable for a while, often, not always, and this is not a blame the victim thing, this is just a statement of fact, they start to believe that they don't need to take their medication because they don't have evidence of their mental health, of their severe persistent mental illness. So they stop taking their medication, and the cycle starts all over again. That's a very thorny problem. It's one of the reasons that this state has advanced mental health directives separate from advanced directives, so that people with known severe persistent mental illness, when they are stable and able to engage in a true consent conversation, can authorize someone close to them to make treatment decisions on their behalf if they choose to go off their medication. Because otherwise it's a violation of their personal autonomy.
So forgive me, I'm probably oversimplifying because I'm not an expert in this field. But it just seems to me that there's an obvious disjunct that you're pointing out, which is that if we're trying to reduce the number of people who are in jail, who are being confined, and in jail it's obligatory for them to stay, and if we place them in treatment facilities, it's not obligatory for them to stay.
That's not quite right.
Okay, sorry, we've been talking a lot, very eloquently, about this problem, but I don't understand how you're talking about, we know how to fix this problem, more beds, and we've known this for a long time. I don't understand why these
Which
resources.
neighborhood are we gonna put the SRTF in?
So it's an energy problem?
Partly. It's also a staffing problem. It's also a ongoing
But
funding
we've
problem
had
because.
decades to solve
Okay,
this problem.
I told you we have underfunded this for decades. I said that up front.
Okay.
So just to be clear.
No,
I
you
did
said
not
it,
die-
but that doesn't take responsibility away
Okay.
from.
I also told you that I've been in the legislature for 11 years, and as long as I've been in the
Okay.
legislature, and even for the 9 years before that, when I was doing advocacy to help people have improved access to health care, I was talking about it then. So for 20 years, I personally have been talking about this issue.
So I get that.
I'm not trying to be defensive, I'm just trying to be really clear on the record.
Also, to be clear, it seems like you're suggesting that the counties aren't shouldering their burden. And if I'm wrong, please.
I think
correct
that's
that.
part of the problem. It's not the only problem, but it's
But you
definitely
think in
part
part
of the
because of
problem.
this screwy pay
Because of the,
incentive,
yes,
that
I do.
counties,
I
you
do.
think may have more capacity and they are not utilizing it?
I think that every governmental jurisdiction in this state is strapped to care for people, right?
Mhm.
And it is expensive to provide the right kinds of care, especially when people get to the point where they're living on the street and they are unstable. That's when it gets really, really expensive.
But it's not
So-
more expensive than what we're doing right now, which is
Oh, no.
optimization.
No, it is absolutely not more expensive. The problem is, right now, so if you want, so we just got a new Medicaid waiver, right? We just got a new Medicaid. One of the things that we're getting from that is the ability to get federal match for general fund dollars that we spend on housing for people like this, for permanent supportive housing for people with severe persistent mental illness, for people who are coming out of being in Department of Corrections custody, 4 kids coming out of the foster system because they age out. These are the people at most risk for ending up on the street.
So to get to Lucas's question, is the reason why we're worse off than most states because we have underfunded more than most states over the last 20 years, or because we have more mentally ill people in the state of Oregon per capita?
I think the
If there's another
underfunding,
answer, I'd
I
love
think
to
the
know.
underfunding is 100% correct. I think that it's a little hard to know how you define the number of mentally ill people per capita. And so I'm a little bit hard pressed to answer that part of the question. I think the third reason is that we haven't done enough upstream investment in helping people and identifying mental health problems and substance use issues early.
And
Which
so-
might leave the part two actually just in a different spot. In other words, we might have more people who are mentally ill because we didn't do something early.
Exactly.
So-
Because we know that when we treat people early,
Sure.
we can actually help them live productive lives and stay stable.
So Elizabeth, gets to Lucas's question, which isn't directed at you personally, but it is, given that there's been 20 years of underfunding and given that there has been one party in control of the state, is it fair to blame the Democratic Party for
Okay,
saying?
so first of all, Democrats haven't been fully in control for 20 years by any means. As recently as the 2011-12 biennium, the House was split 50-don't. I get it, but I just want to be really clear on the record. And even if you say that during that time the Democrats were in control because we had a Democratic governor and Democratic Senate, the House didn't go Democrat till 2007, which is 15 years ago.
Is it fair to say
So-
that my statement is more true than not?
Sure, but I just think, I mean, accuracy is important. You guys are a
Absolutely,
newspaper.
but the
and
question
you-
is to who,
Okay,
to who do we look to for this
so
underfunding?
okay,
Because I promise you, if
tell
you
me,
were,
tell me something. Tell me something. Do we put enough into public education in the state?
sure, you could make the argument that we put enough in public education, it's where that money goes, if you look at us on a per capita basis to other states.
Yeah, and is higher education affordable? Do we think that our class sizes are the right size? Do we think that we've got enough? We have, up until a few years ago, been making enough investments in career and technical education, in all those kinds of things that we know help kids in schools? I would argue no, because we have some real challenges in this state about how our budget is structured. We cannot save for a rainy day, even though we do a pretty good job of it, we can't do it the same way because of the kicker, right? So we've had to always make decisions, always, about what we fund and what we don't fund. And furthermore, for a long time, mental health maintained a stigma, and people were like, why can't you just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and solve your own damn
But
problem?
not more of a stigma in Oregon than any other state. We're talking about relative to other states. Oregon and a party which has been in control for much of the past 2 decades has underfunded mental health. And we're just trying to
I
identify
think-
what's unusual
and
about
I
either
think-
the Oregon Democratic Party or the state of Oregon.
I think there has been a little bit of ostrich behavior on the part of a lot of people. I think that many Oregonians still believe that people with mental health issues still, and it's hard to get funding through when a significant percentage of Oregonians across the state still believe that if you have a mental health problem, it is your own darn fault. And if you only got right and got God, and, you know, I'm not trying to be.
That's not unique to Oregon or Oregonians.
I think there are a lot of other states. I mean, California doesn't do any better than we do. Generally speaking, California has at least as big a problem as we do. I mean.
Well, at least according to what the AHA, our access to mental health care is, I think, above Guam's. I mean, I think it is just about the worst in the country.
I don't know all of the historical reasons why that's true. Okay, I just don't. And I'm not gonna claim the knowledge I don't have.
Okay.
What I can say is, we're pivoting. We've pivoted for 4 years, at least 4 years now, longer, because I've been on the Human Services Subcommittee since 2012, and I've seen the state progressively make more investments. And in particular, beginning in 2019, we've made substantially increased investments. But throwing money at a problem doesn't solve it overnight. Do we have a problem? Did we underinvest? Yes. I'm not going to argue about that, but I can't tell you exactly why. What I can say is, we're trying really hard to fix it now. And we can keep going back with the 2020 retrospectoscope and say what we should have done. And we can keep trying to blame ourselves and others in the past. All I can say is, we're doing our damnedest right now to try to fix a really big problem that affects people all over this state. And it is not an easy fix because this is not a single factor problem. And you cannot have a single factor solution to a multifactorial problem. So we're trying, we're making progress. It's not fast enough for any of us to be happy.
What in your mind would be the single best marker of progress? What would you ask Oregonians rate your caucus's success moving forward? What's the measurable?
I think fewer people cycling in and out of the criminal justice system because of behavioral health issues. Because the vast majority of people with behavioral health issues are not dangerous and do not commit crimes, except for if you consider being homeless a crime, which I don't, right? If you are living in a tent on my street, and I live in the Pearl District, right? I got plenty of tents near me. The people who live in tents on the street, keep their areas tidy, don't threaten passersby, I'm fine with that. I don't like the fact that they have to be living on the streets, but there are people who actively do not want to live
Do
in a
you
permanent.
own in the Pearl? Do you rent?
Yes, I own. And I'm perfectly happy about that, despite the fact that my window got broken in the other
Well,
day.
you're happy about the fact that your property values have gone down. Well, you're there for the long term.
I'm invested in this city.
And how about
Portland,
your-
I've lived in Portland for
how about
30
your, I'm just wondering, how about your neighbors in the Pearl? Do they feel the same way?
Some of them do and some of them don't. Some of them are unhappy and leaving, and other people are moving in because they believe that we can turn this around, and they believe that we are turning around. Most of my neighbors say they've seen a noticeable difference over the past year. It's not perfect by any means, but I can tell you I've lived here a long time and I've seen Portland go through cycles before.
Okay,
We're gonna come out of this.
where are we?
Well, let's, we're out of time. So
Longest endorsement interview for anybody who's on
I warned you.
imagine if your opponent.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, we'd be so amused. It would be so fun.
We've reached the fun.
He's run against me twice before.
Do I know it?
It's John Verbeek.
Oh yeah, I remember John.
Yeah. John, who believes that you can solve the school funding crisis by fixing the sex ed curriculum. John, who believes that doctors not being able to prescribe horse treatments for COVID is lawlessness, and that I should change that so that people can prescribe anything they want, whether it's evidence-based or not.
You know, we had a candidate, a new candidate for state rep come in, and we were talking about the shortage of dentists and dental techs.
Uh-huh.
And I brought up the issue that for more than a decade, there has been an effort to create a new sort of dental tech that would have,
Dental therapists.
yeah, that would have expanded training and be able to do something
Which I've
that dentists
supported.
did, which I know you supported, but it's gotten its ass kicked every year because of the Oregon Dental Association. And of course, this representative, Haifan, who's a dentist, is supported by the Oregon Dental Association, and he gave me 100 reasons on what we should do to get more dentists and dental techs, but none of them included this one. So is the Oregon Dental Association, I mean, I remember writing about this 30 years ago about ophthalmologists who were trying to encroach on the territory of optometrists or the other way, and these turf battles in the medical field are
They
really
infuriate me. They
expensive for
infuriate me.
Oregonians.
And
So
to be
what
honest
is-
with you, I have disappointed the Oregon Medical Association over and over and over again because within a pretty broad range, I mean, as far as I can remember, I have voted for every scope of practice expansion that's come in front of me since I've been in the legislature. And my colleagues are not best pleased with me sometimes, and that's okay, because it's what's right for Oregonians. Access to healthcare is important, and as long as we're convinced,
So let's talk about this dental therapist thing. So it's very specific. As far as I understand, the only people opposed to this is the Oregon Dental Association. And yet they're able to hold up a maneuver that would
I
reduce
don't know
costs and
who's-
increase the number of,
I don't know who, do I know that they've been opposed to it? Sure.
yeah,
Do I know exactly whose ear they have had to kill it? No. I mean, to be honest with you, I've been kind of buried in Ways and Means in LFO, legislative fiscal, for 4 years now. And there's a lot that happens that I'm not completely connected to. So do I know who's been killing it? No, I don't.
But
Do I
you're
know?
obviously familiar with
Of
this.
course I'm familiar with it. I mean, it's a healthcare issue. Of course I
And
pay
there have been
attention.
other attempts at expanding scope of practices that you've supported that have also failed.
Most of the ones that I've supported have passed. Nurse practitioners can do vasectomies, optometrists
I'm
can
sorry,
prescribe
who can do
medication.
vasectomies now?
Nurse practitioners
Oh, okay.
can do vasectomies. Optometrists can prescribe medications. CRNAs can prescribe narcotics for people who were post-op.
So we have
I
been
mean-
able to expand the scope.
Oh, yeah, for lots of things. For lots of things. I do not understand why this one has hit such a heavy barrier, and it bothers me, which is why I've continued to support it. Because if you don't have good oral health, you can't have good physical health. And I've said that over and over and over again. And we should not be separating mental health, vision, and oral health from physical health, because they're all inextricably intertwined.
Okay,
If the world ended tomorrow, what's the one food you have to have on your menu for your last meal tonight?
Peanut butter.
what would be
Just plain,
bran, salted, unsalted, crunchy, come on, we need details.
Crunchy, natural, no extras, nothing, just peanuts, crunchy,
Is there a
peanut.
brand?
Adams.
Adams is great.
Very good.
How old are you?
That is-
That's what's in my refrigerator right now, because it comes in very large jars at Costco.
How old are you?
Oh my, 59. I have to think about it for a second. Pushing 60 soon.
How soon? As in, I'm sorry, but if.
Not before the
Yeah, we
election,
don't want to get your, we don't
Not
want to
before
get
the
your age
election.
on the paper.
not before the election. During the 23 session, I will turn 60 during the 23 session.
That's fine. It's not I'm not trying to be invasive.
No,
It's just that I
it's
want to run a
fine.
correction.
My birthday is public record, I think.
Oh, you're
At this
sure?
point, I'm a
We're
legislator.
just lazy, we didn't want to look it up.
Okay, I'm
Can
59.
you talk a minute about your practice?
Mark, we are so out of time. The next person.
Oh,
is already lined up.
it's 3 o'clock.